Hi, my name's Tony Morrow, and this is Introduction to Project Management. In previous episodes, we've talked about money, but from the perspective of how expensive the project will be. But the world doesn't run on money, even though the banks might want you to think it does. The world runs on food, fuel, people, and if you're my daughter, fishy crackers. And so do our projects. Well, maybe not fishy crackers, but our projects need a combination of human and physical resources in order to complete work and produce deliverables. Project resource management is the process we use to identify, acquire, and manage the resources needed for the successful completion of the project. Physical resources are what many of us first think of in this category. You'll need stone to build the pyramids, steel to manufacture ships, vaccines to combat disease, and of course, money to buy it all. People, or human resources, are critical to project success. Skilled labor in the form of your project team, or that expert judgment we keep referring to, are the human elements that turn ideas into reality. Lastly, let's think about time. Time is tricky because we always have too much of it until we don't, and then we never have enough. We've thought about time before when it comes to our schedule, and estimating the time different activities and work packets in the WBS will take. For planning resource management, we need to consider it from the perspective of how it relates to other resources. A task will take longer if one person works on it instead of 3, and shorter if 10 people are working on it instead of 1. Now, this isn't a universal truth, but I can move more rocks with 10 people versus 1. Answer more phones, and process more applications for services. In the same way, I potentially do work faster if I have the physical resources to match my human resources. Do I have enough phones or chairs and desks for people to work at? Do I have enough paper forms or computers for processing applications for services? Identifying these various resources and how they relate or influence each other is critical to understand for our project success. To start planning, we'll need our inputs. Our project charter, which includes high-level requirements and pre-approved financial resources that can influence the resource management of the project. Our quality management plan, which we discussed in our last episode. And our scope baseline, which lays out our deliverables, which will inform the quantities of the resources we'll need. We'll need some documents, like our project schedule, requirements documentation, our risk register, which we haven't done yet, so we may have to review this after we discuss risk, our stakeholder register, as our stakeholders and their ability to provide us physical resources will impact the project, and our team, our stakeholders, as they are human resources that impact the project. You get the idea. And of course, wait for it, F's and OPAs. With these references in hand, now we need to tap into our expert judgment to help us identify, negotiate, and acquire resources, manage the logistics and talent, or understand how much of any one resource we may need. And let's dive into the data. We have our WBS, and as part of our OPAs, an organizational chart or organizational breakdown structure. In a similar way, we have a resource breakdown structure, a hierarchical representation of resources by category and type. In the military, this can be weapons and ammunition, food and fuel, or for us, maybe it's people and time. We can break down how many technicians, managers, hours of work, or overtime is available to apply to the project. A useful tool to help manage some of this data, the people and the communication between them, is a RAM. No, not that kind of RAM. RAM stands for Responsibility Assignment Matrix and shows resources assigned to each work package in the WBS. These can be high level, low detail, or dialed in to specific work packets. One type of RAM is called a RACI. No. RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consult, and Information. This lists activities and then individuals, positions, or organizations that are responsible or accountable for them, or consulted and informed about them. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, the world watched or was informed of the great accomplishment. Managers are responsible for the performance of their team, and the government is accountable for its policies. And I'm consulted by my daughter as to whether we have any fishy crackers in the cupboard. Obviously, I fail to inform her that I bought a new bag. After meeting with the team, stakeholders, and the sponsor, we create some outputs. We have a refined resource management plan where we have identified the resources we need, we know how we're going to acquire them, and we have a control plan on how they will be used. A team breakdown of the roles, responsibilities, competencies, and authority of different team members. A project team resource management plan so we know how team resources will be defined, staffed, managed, and eventually released. For example, who gets the new computer, any training or team development that may be required, and creation of a team charter, a contract between members of the team that lays out team values, communication guidelines, decision-making criteria and process, conflict resolution, meeting guidelines, and any team agreements. We also have to update our risk register, which we will cover in an upcoming episode, and add to our assumption log, an activity that we touched on when we created our project charter. Now we have a plan in place on the macro or the big scale. It might even have a lot of detail, but now we are going to dial in on the individual activities and estimate activity resources. This will map out exactly what we need to do for individual work. We created our resource management plan, so we will need that, and we will also need our scope baseline. For project documents, we'll need our activity attributes, the activity list, assumption log, cost estimates, and a resource calendar. You might know this by another name. It's a breakdown of the working days, shifts, business hours, holidays, or other constraints on when resources are available. It can also identify for how long those resources are available for the project. We'll also need our risk register and our best friends, Fs and OPAs. With these references in hand, we'll bring in some expert judgment. Combine that with some estimates. Remember, that's bottom up, analogous, this is similar to that, or parametric, the dollars per square feet, and data analysis, and a project management information system. Those are the software tools that we use. Hold meetings to bring it all together with the project team, project manager, stakeholders, and sponsors, and anyone else who you think should be there. And we have our outputs. Resource requirements, the type and quality of resources required for each activity, work package, WBS branch, and the project as a whole. The basis of estimates are the details on how we came up with the estimate. This includes assumptions, constraints, risks, references, resource breakdown structure. That's like a WBS or an org chart as a hierarchical breakdown of resources by type and category. We need to update our activity attributes by including the resources required for the activity, the assumption log related to the type and quantities of resources required, and lessons learned, updating the best practices for effective techniques. In today's episode, we defined and discussed project resource management, resource breakdown structure, RAMs and RACI, and we estimated activity resources. In the next episode, we'll explore communications and understand why Abbott and Costello's skit, Who's on First, could spell doom for your project.